Okay, Yasmin. That's all. Good morning, everybody. It's very nice to have you all here, and I will introduce you in person very soon. My name is Yasmin Sharif. I'm the Director of Education Cannot Wait. I feel very honored to be part of this session today. So, excuse me. First of all, welcome to our jury session on the Resource Mobilization Challenge. There are challenges, but there are always opportunities with challenges. Now, what we have seen so far is that the challenge has been a huge success story already. Our call, when we went out to do this call for bold initiatives on fundraising, we received 200 very innovative proposals, and they came in from all over the world. So this has had a global outreach, and I would like to thank all of you who are among the lucky ones who are here today, but I just wish that all the 200 out there feel that we have received, read, and really appreciated that creativity. Now, today we have 6 finalists with us, and they will discuss their 8 ideas and present it to our very distinguished jury. I'm Swedish. I sometimes mess up on that day. And tomorrow around 11:25 a.m. New York time, we will announce the winners at the Global People's Summit. That's a big thing. And you will be able to watch that announcement online. Again, global outreach. But before we continue, I would like to introduce our very distinguished jury who are here with us today early in the morning. And I'll start with the lady on my left hand, a dear colleague from the UN system, Henriette Excise, who is the Deputy Executive Coordinator of the UN Multi-Partnership Trust Fund Office, which is the biggest trust fund office, well, maybe in the world too, one was. Well, it's certainly a very credible big body in the UN. And on my right, I have Caleb Baloo, Investment Officer and Innovative Finance Specialist from the Rockefeller Foundation. We are very honored to have you with us today. Rockefeller needs no further introduction. We've all been to that beautiful ice skating rink close to the Rockefeller Center. And we also know, I think Rockefeller lent the land for building the UN down by the river. Great support for the United Nations back then. And online, we got Gail Peterson, who is an associate fellow at Said Business School, University of Oxford, and founder of PFC, Social Impact Advisors. So Gail, welcome on board. I'm very happy to hear about you. Of course, we're all familiar with the highly esteemed Oxford University. So we are very proud to have you with us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then we have Drew von Glan. He's also with you. Hi, Drew. Welcome so much. And you come from the World Bank, and you are a senior advisor, the social finance specialist. And the World Bank is a great partner of ECW and many, the UN at large. So we are very honored to have you with us, and say hello to all our friends over there. Then we'll move forward. Also to mention that the director of the Education Commission and chief of staff of the UN Special Envoy for Global Education, Mr. Gordon Brown, is the director of his office, and chief of staff, Justin Van Fleet, has reviewed the proposals and contributed to the assessment, but he unfortunately cannot be here personally today, as everyone is preparing for the UN General Assembly opening next week. Likewise, we have a colleague from the High Commissioner for Refugees, Shireen Pakfar, Global Head of Private Sector Partnership Development, who is also a dear close colleague and friend, who too is preparing for the UN General Assembly week. So all UN people are busy this week, but has also taken time to thoroughly review all the proposals and offered for assessment. Now, so we have this incredible world-class jury panel in place, and just having them come and get their attention and time is a huge recognition in itself. It shows that we really received high-quality, top-notch proposals for them to take time off their busy schedules. And we now hope that the innovations and those who have gone to the finals will of course yield a prize of $25,000, but also from there help us scale up innovations in order to attract resources from around the globe that will benefit children and youth who are caught up by armed conflict, natural disasters, and epidemics. And we think that there is a growing political consensus around the globe that if we don't close the financing gap of $8.5 billion to deliver quality education to children and youth in crisis, we are not putting our priorities in the right place. I just read a quote by Mahatma Gandhi, and he said, if you want peace in the world, educate the children. And for children who live in crisis and see violence every day, nothing is more important to them than to be given an education and a new opportunity in life to be productive citizens of the world. Now, for the next 90 minutes, our finalists will have 5 minutes each to present their ideas to our distinguished jury, and they will also have 5 minutes to answer the jury's questions. And for those who are joining us online, you can pose questions with the Google Hangouts chat area, and you can share on your favorite and their innovations, and you can share top ideas to mobilize more funds for education in crisis. I mean, we just want to attract creativity and smart thinking and doing that can be translated into action. So everyone is participating in this. Now, we are going to start from here. So that's the opening remarks. Everyone ready? Okay, here we go. The first presentation is by Yasser Bentaibi, who comes from For Consulting on the Global Investment Fund. Yasser, are you ready?
Hello.
Ahlan wa sahlan.
Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm all good. Thank you very much.
Please go ahead. The floor is yours.
All right. I just wanted to ask first, should I share my presentation with you? Or should I?
Yes, please. Please go ahead. The floor is yours. You share the presentation. You have about 5 minutes to sell your great idea to us.
All right. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for the interest you've showed in this initiative. I'd like to thank the jury for their presence with us. Like you mentioned, they're very busy people, and it's an honor for us to be here with them, to hear our ideas and maybe try to ameliorate them. I'm trying to find out how I can share my screen here. I think it's, have I shared my screen now?
No, not yet. No, not yet. We see you, but we don't see the screen now.
Okay, we will do it for you. You just tell us where you are in your presentation. We can do it. Just go ahead. Just go ahead. Tell us which slide you are.
First slide.
Okay.
So it is the Endowment Fund for Education. Basically, the idea is the creation of an endowment for development fund, which will generate profits and which will all go towards education. Not much can be said in 5 minutes. However, I try to put the main ideas. I'll start by, I'm now in the second slide, Mr. Johannes. I'll start by the idea, quickly mention the idea and how it will impact education on the short and long term. And then we'll talk about some innovative aspects. Then we'll talk about the implementation process, the costs and the risks involved. Slide number 3, if possible. So the idea basically is the creation of an endowment fund for education in emergencies. The approach consists of investing the capital of the fund in development projects, mainly through economic empowerment. These projects will then generate profit, which will be channeled towards educational programs in emergencies. Endowment for development and economic empowerment, the two approaches developed by the IDB, Islamic Development Bank, and For Consulting, previously known as the IBF Group. These approaches put at heart disadvantaged populations in terms of the investments made. Basically, the approach of economic empowerment considers the poor as a potential business partner rather than a burden on society. And this is why we decide to invest with them rather than giving them microcredits or microloans. Of course, this will have a direct and indirect impact on education, which we can talk about later on. The economic empowerment approach is basically giving disadvantaged populations access to financing, investment support, trainings, and many other risk management methods that allows them to be assisted throughout the financing they get and the benefits they get. I'm now in the fourth slide. So, impact in education. The fund will allow us to impact education from three main axes on the short and the long term. First of all, the economic empowerment projects generates income to these families. This will allow them to invest in their future's education. We've had previous experiences where we've taken families out of poverty and automatically they took out their children when they were in rural areas from agricultural fields to let them go study, and others in cities who would go and try to find jobs during the day were put back to school because the priorities were not the same anymore. They had income coming in. The second axe we will be impacting education from will be prioritizing investments related to educational facilities. So some of our economic empowerment projects will be through investing in educational facilities, be it schools, transportations, anything related to education, which will impact on the short and long term. When we talk about economic empowerment perspective, what we mean is, for example, in villages in Sudan, we created schools which allowed us to employ young graduates who didn't have jobs. This was the first impact, was employing young people, and the school served as a potential project for them. And as third, the children who did not have access to schools in those villages were able to join those schools. The profit generated from the economic empowerment projects will be invested exclusively for education in emergencies. Now, the fund will be created, investments will be made in economic empowerment, and profits will be generated. The profits generated...
Yes, sir, you have 1 minute left, okay?
1 minute left out of the presentation?
Yes. You only have 5 minutes.
Okay. So the innovation of this fund, the endowment status and management guarantees durability and sustainability of the funds. Issuing endowment bonds under the form of sukuk will attract Islamic endowments to contribute in the fund. The resource mobilization is twice as stronger since we will be tackling poverty alleviation actors and educational actors. The profits generated will go towards funding the ECW initiatives. Investing in educational infrastructure as economic project will be a priority. Very close collaboration and partnerships with different actors in the social field will be something we'll be working on. The resource mobilization potential.
Do your concluding remarks. Thank you very much.
Yes. Give me one more minute, please. The resource mobilization potential. The backers interested in both elevation of poverty and education will both invest in the same fund. The universality of the fund allows broader impact. The economic, social, and educational impacts will encourage countries in need to invest in the fund to benefit from it. The sukuk bonds will allow people around the world to invest in the fund. At the end of the first year, success stories will attract endowment funds, organizations, donors, sovereign fund businessmen, individuals to invest even more. The implementation process is very simple, developing strong ties with strategic partners such as the IDB and other similar organizations, drafting a status and governance charter, the creation of the fund, and creating a management team specifically dedicated to the fund under ECW supervision, or outsource the fund's management to a competing party. Finally, the cost. Well, we have created funds with $500 million for economic empowerment in Palestine. This was made recently. We're now working on creating a $1 billion fund for Emirates and for Qatar. People are very keen to invest in projects related to poverty alleviation and education at the same time. The first year should be 100 million, the second year 50, the third 50, fourth 50, fifth 50, and sixth 50 years. We will have accumulated the 508 millions. The funds generated for ECW the first year will be 12 and will amount to $56 million the sixth year. This is a huge amount which will allow them to invest in emergencies. The risks are risk related to economic empowerment and have proved to be low. This is due to very tight risk management methods in the economic empowerment approach. And the investments in different countries and different domains will contribute to minimizing the risks. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Yasser. First of all, you're the first one to do your presentation. Just to reassure you, it's always the toughest. The toughest position to be in when you're the number one to do the presentation. And secondly, rest assured that we will base eventually, of course, our decisions on your written submission. And we also enjoyed your presentation, though we have a very limited amount of time. I will now hand over to the distinguished jury if they have any questions for you, and just be ready to answer them. Very short, very concise, and remember, we do have your written submission. So a comprehensive idea like this cannot be explained in a short period of time, so not to worry about that. I will start with our colleague to the left, or maybe we should go around, whoever wants to ask. We will go around the table. So, dear Henriette, would you like to ask first?
Maybe just one question, and you alluded to this, Henriette, from the Multiple Trust Fund Office. If you look at your current experience with economic empowerment project, what is your current total volume of economic empowerment project that you have experience with investing it? So, which enables us to see whether the volume proposed is realistic. And my second question was, okay, go ahead.
The sound is not clear. I can't hear. I couldn't hear the question.
He can't hear the question. Would you like to maybe? Yeah.
My question is on your current experience with similar investments. So what is the current portfolio that you have worked on for economic empowerment projects that through you or your company or whatsoever you have invested with and experience with, to give us a sense of whether the scale you're proposing here is realistic to be achieved?
Great. Well, economic empowerment projects have been implemented in Palestine, Sudan, Yemen, Djibouti, now in Tunisia and Libya. The portfolio size in Palestine, for instance, was $20 million the first year. It was conducted by the UNDP with collaboration with the UNDP and showed great potential in terms of wealth creation and accessibility to social services. We usually generate a net profit at the end of these micro projects of between 8 to 12%, and in some cases, between 8 to 12%, and in some cases 14% net profit. This allows us to revolve it back to the fund and invest in other economic empowerment projects.
Thank you very much, Yasser. Thank you, Henriette. We will have time for only one more question in order to move over. It's not obligatory to ask questions because you have already read the proposal. Is there anyone who feels after the presentation that you need answer to something that has not been shared in this presentation or in the writing? Thank you very much. And let me say, from my perspective as a chair of this, I think one of the strengths that comes out of this is the combination of poverty alleviation and education, because it's all interrelated and it refers back to the Sustainable Development Goals. So a very brilliant idea. Thank you very much, Yasser. Thank you so much.
One last comment, if possible. I just want to emphasize on the fact that it is a development endowment, and the endowment enables it to be durable and sustainable over time. So the ECW initiative will have a perennity of maybe 10, 20, 30 years to continue its initiative. And this is the second most important aspect of the fund. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much for that, Nasser. Thank you. Thank you. We really appreciate your presentation and your emphasis on development in the long term and sustainability. Thank you. Next presentation, and I think we are almost on time. It's just falling a few minutes behind. Next presentation will be done by Lisa Bjerman, who is here with us in the studio today and smiling. And we are very happy to have you with us, Lisa. And Lisa comes from, she's presenting the Charity Motivation app. And so please open up. The floor is yours. And I am amazed that you can smile like this in the morning. It's only 7 o'clock.
Yeah, I know.
Yes, it's lovely. It's contagious. Please, Lisa, the floor is yours.
Okay, I would like to introduce you today to the Charity Motivation app. The basic idea, I will just read it to you. With this app, users can set realistic goals for behavior change. Whenever users do not achieve their goal, they pay a fee. This fee will be donated to Education Cannot Wait. You probably ask yourself now, how does it work? In order to explain it to you, I will introduce you to Lisa. Looks a bit like me. So Lisa would like to make some changes in her everyday life. She has heard about an app called Charity Motivation app. She really likes the idea and she downloads it. While she downloads it, she sees different categories like karma, social life, health. She decides to take on a health challenge of being active. She joins an already existing group where people walk 10,000 steps every day for a month. She sets up her profile and she decides to donate $1 in case she doesn't achieve her daily goal. During the challenge, she fills in her achievements. Every day when she doesn't succeed, she pays $1, which even motivates her more to be successful the next day. During the challenge, the app sends her motivational messages and advice on how to keep on. And she can also chat with other group members to motivate each other. After 1 month, Lisa's very happy because she feels great. She has succeeded 25 days and just 5 days she hasn't. She donated $5 to Education Cannot Wait, and she also shares her results on social media because she's very proud of her achievement. In the future, she wants to start a new challenge on reducing her phone use, and she also wants to invite all her friends because they use their phones a lot. She wants to donate $10 anyway in the end, because there's also the option to make a donation of $10 or $5 or whatever in case you have been successful. So this has been Lisa's story. I hope it made it a bit more clear to you what the idea is about. And now I would like to go on to the implementation. The startup cost could range between $60,000 and $100,000 US. However, it has to be said that it highly depends on the scope of the project, meaning which features would be used, what would be the operating system, would it be iOS, would it be Android, also how big would be the target group. The ongoing costs include marketing, ongoing development, including maintenance, and the technical and customer service. But again, this cost really depends on the scope of the project. The timeline for the app development, for starting it up, would be 3 to 4 months. To the risks, some categories are based on trust, which is like the biggest risk, I would say. Some categories are traceable, some categories are not. But it could be counteracted. For example, the group function. In a group, people always feel a feeling of solidarity, which could counteract that they will not pay the donation amount. It could be counteracted by the social media function, that they can share their donation and also their achievements in social media, which would be a great motivational factor. And it could be counteracted that they can set their own donation amount. Means if they say they want to donate $1, they are more likely to donate the dollar because it's their decision. Another risk is that it's difficult to estimate how many people would use this app. So it would be difficult to say what would be the fundraising potential in the end. However, I strongly believe it has potential because people always seek to improve themselves. They always seek to develop themselves. Now to the potential, to the more positive thing. This app creates a win-win situation. People either improve their lifestyle, or they donate, or they do both. It is an independent idea, which means it doesn't depend on partnerships. However, partnerships are possible. You could make a cooperation with a foundation, for example, who has the same objective. but it is not necessary. Another potential is advertisement. Advertisement can raise additional funds, and it could also approach a non-traditional donor group. Like, for example, people who would normally not donate might donate in this app. And also another potential is that taxes in some countries can be written off taxes. Donations can be written off taxes. So overall, this app has potential to raise funds for education cannot wait, and at the same time improve people's lifestyle.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Lisa. Thank you so much. Before we move on, I would like to ask anyone in the panel if you have any questions for Lisa.
I'm curious how, if you win, how would you use the first $25,000? I mean, obviously partnerships, app development, marketing, they're all critical, but what would you kind of use their first cash for?
I don't know. I would probably use it to find a partner who would create the app with me and then write the business plan, and yeah, and marketing, like what you just said.
And is the idea that you would partner, with UNICEF and these programs explicitly and rely on them for some service?
Thank you, Lisa. I must say I was very excited by the idea, because I think it lies in time with the whole growth of social media, everyone looking for new ideas. So that's one thing. Social media is so important, and the apps. And the other one is that setting goals is so important, but you need an incentive and you need sticks and carrots. So quite innovative, very exciting. I might use it myself. Yeah. Thank you so very much for that. We'll move on, Lisa. And now
we can do two or more questions if there's more questions.
Is there any more?
Maybe Drew or Gail on the phone.
Sorry. I am so sorry. Drew and Gail, I'm really sorry because I have completely left you out for the first round, and I'm going to be more attentive to you. Drew or Gail, do you have any questions?
My question is really about experience, and I'm actually in Silicon Valley right now, and have worked on apps myself. Can you talk a little bit more about your experience in the tech sector, and with whom you might work, or what your background's been? Getting an app to work that's successful is hard.
To be honest, I have a completely different background. I studied human geography, but I have already talked with a lot of app developers, and I cannot really explain it to you because I don't have the actual experience in app development. It's just the idea which came from my brain.
Good. Thank you.
We like good ideas. And Drew?
No, I'm good at the moment. That's great, thank you. But I'll wave my hand if I have a question next time to catch in. All right.
So. And thank you, Gail, for your question. I think we have one more here. Is Henriette? Yeah.
Lisa, I have a question, and it's just basically looking, how do you ensure that the goals that people set will link with the shared norms and values of the UN system? Because people might set goals which are actually opposite to what the UN is achieving with the SDGs. So how are you going to deal with that?
So there would be 5 main categories, which could be in line with the SDG, because we would set these categories. I don't know, there would be I imagine it to have like an open category, but that would be difficult to actually trace. We could leave the open category out like this. We could make sure that it's in line with the development goals.
Great.
Really good question.
Yeah, I thought that was a great question, and I think that's very important, of course, that everything has to be aligned with the UN value system. But I would suggest, using the Universal Declaration for Human Rights and zoom in on some of the key rights that are related to education. It's a very good, and that's something we all need to do, whether we use the app or not. And that's fundamental to peaceful coexistence in this world. So thank you very much for that, Lisa. We'll now move on to the third finalist, which is Richard Murray from Equity Schools and Reverse Debt Conversion. You are with us, Richard?
Yes. Can you hear me all right?
We hear you great over here. So,
okay. No, you have a screen problem.
Now we see many Richards here, no?
Yes. Well, let's... how did we do this before, Johannes? We tested this, right?
Yes, you take the full screen mode, and you don't show the application, but the whole screen. But now you're black.
Okay. Are you seeing anything now?
No.
No, it's still black. Okay. Let me the whole screen, share the whole screen. Any better now?
Yes.
Resource mobilization?
Yes.
Hooray! Okay. Well, so
Please.
I've already got one victory for the day. Thank you, everybody. And one of the things, I thank you for the time and attention here and this opportunity. In looking at all of these, I just wanted to say, you know, your call was for bold ideas, and everybody that I see here has bold ideas. And I think one of the key things here, as different as they all are, is that they're taking a different perspective in meeting the challenge. And they're not primarily based on the participants' beneficence, which is different. I mean, it's an unusual thing here, and I think it's good, and I'm glad we're exploring it. So in this instance, I do like to look at ideas that have already worked first. And so in this instance, what I'm calling reverse debt conversion, I did some work in more conventional debt conversions back in the 1990s. And so I thought I would explore that a little bit further. And for a lot of reasons, I'm imagining most everybody on this call is familiar with how those work at some level. They don't really apply very well to the conditions. You have to have, of course, just ideal conditions to make these things work, and they're a lot of effort. But once I started looking at them, I started thinking perhaps this could lead in another direction that would be helpful. And so to do that, I started looking at existing debts that are out there of all different kinds and locations. And by the way, I just thought it'd be nicer to look at a path than a lot of numbers. It has nothing to do with this. I like the picture. So this is what I thought I would start with. In the United States, you can look at commercial debts, but I started looking at the four major categories of home, auto, credit, and student loan debt, which is ballooning right now. And what I wound up focusing on were the latter two, as they are unsecured debts. And they're enormous, and we'll come to that. But let me just sort of recap, and here's an incredibly simplified version of the original debt conversion situation, where you have a creditor and typically one creditor, one debtor, and it's in default. The debt is in default. And typically, again, 20 years ago, that debtor might be a central bank in a developing state or somewhere like that. The creditor could be US, European, whatever. And so there's a situation there, and what has happened, and it might be a conversion for nature or for a social cause or whatever. A new player comes into the picture here and negotiates a three-way, there are other ways of doing this, but a three-way arrangement through which the social cause investor will pay a discounted off face value price for that paper, for that debt, and at the same time negotiate a new paper with the debtor, which supports the social cause, which is the motivating force of the investor, and is either in different currency or certainly a lower cost to the debtor. So it's a three-party arrangement. The negotiations are the tough part here, but once they are done, the social investor pays the creditor goes away, and the social investor now has an arrangement with the debtor to support whatever it is that they're after. So might be a little simplified, but that's the essence of it. Why I call this reverse is that now I'm looking at debt in the United States of many debtors and many creditors. So seemingly an impossible logistical problem here. But again, looking at debts that are in default or charge-off, charge-offs would be credit card debt, defaults are the student debts. And you all have the papers that I sent in, so I'm really trying to get at just the fundamentals of the mechanism here. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of numbers. But you have to have just the right kind of conditions here. The creditors have pretty much given up on these debts. they're still live debts, but they have charged them off for their tax purposes. The debtors, meanwhile, are suffering from very bad credit reports. And in the US, that affects all kinds of things, including buying a home or getting a job. And it will hurt them for 7 years. And if it's a student loan, potentially longer. So
1 minute, Richard.
Yes, what?
1 minute, Richard.
Yep. Okay. So in this instance, what I'm suggesting is that we need to find our social investor here is a little different animal. So we need to find a financial partner who will come in and do the negotiations. But in this instance, it's just too many people. So set the conditions and a deadline. So in this instance, it's not an annual fund. I'm talking about a one-time activity that's effectively like an amnesty program. I mean, you come to it within time or you lose the opportunity as a debtor. And so our financial partner sets that out there before the debtors and the creditors with a fixed period of time. And then what happens, and here's some of this reverse flow, is that the many debtors who opt for this will pay the financial partner, will take some modest fees for this. Some of the money will go to the creditors as negotiated, some of it to EIE. In my calculations, I would set those as equal amounts. The creditors then have the ability to clean or at least enhance the credit reports of the US debtors. And the result at the end is that the creditors go away, the US debtors have enhanced or clean perhaps credit reports so they can move ahead with their lives. And meanwhile, the funding that went to EIE has gone directly out into the field. And I'm not going to get into exactly how that works. Just so you have a sense of scale, US credit card debt in the US right now is $1 trillion. Student loan debt's 1.5. And so just looking at student loan debt, if 3% of the default of the loans that are already all the way down the line to default, if we were to get those paid at 5% of their value of 3% of those defaulted loans, that would be a benefit to EIE of $261 million on a one-time basis. It's a matter of logistics, I think, more than anything. That is really the challenge of this mechanism.
Thank you very, very, very much, Richard, for this. I think it's echoing. Is it?
Yeah, okay, now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Richard, for this very concise, to the point presentation on a very complicated matter, but still a very big picture. We too like that beautiful road, the path there, the path least traveled or yet to be tread. So I will pass on to the jury here, and now I will start with our colleagues, Gail and Drew. Do you have any questions for Richard?
Drew here. Yes.
Please.
Richard, I'm assuming you can hear for. If I understand the circle of motivation here is that the original creditor institution would need to work with the rating agencies to say by passing on these obligations to the social investor, they have basically regained their credit status with them. And I'm just, A, maybe my question is incorrect, or B, but it is, what is the linkage that ultimately gets the credit improvement? Because I believe that is the key, the ultimate motivation for a obligor to settle with this social innovation investor.
Richard, please, you may be on mute.
Yeah, he's muted.
Richard, I think.
Let's take 2 other questions.
Okay, well, why don't you see? You can just click unmute, no?
Can you unmute him?
No, he's muted himself.
He's muted himself, but he will hear us, right? Yeah. Richard, can you hear us?
He needs to unmute himself.
You need to unmute. Are you on mute, Richard?
Yes.
Well, we will have to take another question. Is there any other questions from our? Yeah. Please, Richard. Did you hear?
Okay, now I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, Richard.
How about that? Now you can hear me? I can't hear you.
Yes. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me? I'm still not hearing you though.
Yeah, we can't.
Okay.
I can't hear you.
Now I've got you. Okay. Real briefly, the creditors do have the authority to change those credit reports, and that really is what they bring to the table here. So yes, that is a key part of it. I'm sorry for that mute thing. I don't know what happened.
Thank you. That was the response. That's the response. Thank you very much for that. Richard, any other questions around the table?
I'm sorry, but we can't hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I can hear you both. Yes?
Go ahead.
It's not working. I can see your mouth move, but I can't hear you at all.
It's cutting in and out. Yes.
We're all having trouble on this side hearing you all.
Hi, can you hear me now?
No, I don't think it's where you are sitting. I think there's something wrong because we can't hear you at all.
At all? I can hear you now.
No, I can hear you, Richard. I'm Yasser, but I can't hear the team in New York. I can't hear you at all.
I think across the board, we're all hearing each other that are not in New York. Fine, but we cannot hear your room.
If anyone here, who hears New York right now? Is it only
No, it's echoing.
You sound like you are in the bottom of a pool at best.
Yeah.
I can just hear a little bit.
What about now?
Yeah, I can hear you. It's not great, but I can hear you.
Yeah, but
Drew, Jasser, Gail, can you hear us?
It's horrible, actually. The reception is.
Yeah, there's something
My
there
guess is
really.
someone else in the room has an open mic that is listening in remotely as well.
Anyone who has casting around the globe. Yeah. Okay, it's calmed down. Can you hear us from New York now, all of you?
yeah.
Okay. Great. Now we move ahead. Please, I think Caleb had a question, and Richard.
Yes, Richard, I was just wondering how you propose identifying the lenders that have the motivation to participate in this program.
That is the work that's ahead. And so it's as you know, it has to be, the economic conditions have to be bad, but not impossible. And they have to be good enough that there's that magic spot in the middle there. And so finding all of those, there are a lot of those. The first step really is to find the financial partner to work with us to identify those, negotiate them, et cetera. That is the big task, is just the logistics of all of this. The mechanics of it are not that difficult. It is finding and setting this whole thing up that logistically, and finding all those creditors. I mean, there are many, many debtors out there, and the point is to just make this available to them for them to come forward. So we're not negotiating a million different agreements here. It really is operating as an amnesty program. But you're right. I mean, that is the first work to be done.
And Richard, do you envision that there could be any tax advantages to the lenders of participating in this program?
Well, it's a funny thing, because if these have already gone, we're talking, say, credit cards, so they'll be charged off. That means that they've already taken the tax advantage of charging these off as bad debts. I suspect that that's what we need to aim for. And oddly, if they receive any funds at this point, it's really new money to them in a strange way. I mean, it might not help them in terms of taxes, but they'll actually get money they were not expecting. So it has to be that perfect spot where the debt's really bad, but not terrible.
So Richard, what's the low-hanging fruit? I mean, clearly you wouldn't have developed a project if you didn't think there was potential. So if you think about what's the low-hanging fruit, who would you go after first? What kind of institutions specifically?
Well, in my mind, I feel there's more potential on the student loans, just because that's a narrower class. I mean, we kind of know who those people are. They're young people. They're motivated, trying to get started in their lives, and their credit reports are really important. They're not defaulted because they just have too many credit cards. And those are particular types of loans. So I feel that would be easier in the sense that it's a little bit simpler, and I think the debtors are going to be more motivated. There are some more rules involving student loans than there are credit cards, but I think we could work with that. And that also reduces the number of creditors rather dramatically as well.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Richard, and thanks to everyone who's asked questions. A very exciting and enticing proposal indeed, and we are also very happy because it's also complex, but also simple the way you describe it. A chance to also review it in depth in writing, and we know that you have several other ideas that you presented, so we will hear more from you, Richard.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much to you. We'll now move on and have a presentation and invite Mike Makwani. Mike, you're Mike? No, where's Mike? Where's Mike? Ah, there you are, Mike. Good to see you. Where are you right now?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, where are you?
Hello, I'm in Kenya.
Oh, wonderful.
Hello.
I'll be soon in Kenya. How nice. Mike, you are so welcome. Please, the floor is yours. Please, 5 minutes, floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me share the application, sharing. Share. Ooh. Wow. Hello, Johannes.
Yeah, we will show it from here. We will just go ahead. Switch slide.
We'll show it from here. Johannes will take care of that. You just need to talk and explain.
First slide.
Right. On the first slide, my name is Mike Makwani. Thank you and welcome to Global Rotary on mobile phones. I'll be a presenter. The innovation here, the idea basically is to play Rotary on a mobile phone in all countries by all people. Innovation is driven by marrying two concepts. We have a supranational, this is the UN, we have mobile phones, and we have a need for fundraising. The moment you marry those three concepts, then the moment you have a supranational, you need a global, you're addressing a global market. To address a global market, you need mobile phones, and you can do fundraising with that. Let's move on to the next slide. This gives you an idea of the global market that is addressable. The moment you have mobile phones, at this moment we are at 5.1 billion unique subscribers. These are individuals who have mobile phones. Of these, you could say 70 to 80% are unique, not counting the children. And the internet users is a percentage of that, is like 3.3 billion. So the addressable market, if we go with mobile phones, you're talking of that, addressing those 5 billion people simultaneously. Thank you. Next slide. Is an idea of what we want to mobilize resources from all nations, not just the core traditional countries of the US, Australia, Western Europe. No, we want to get resources from the countries that you're seeing on the periphery, the red ones. These are people you rarely ever tap resources from. And these are the people who actually really benefit most from education. Next slide, please. All right. After that, the implementation. you want to address a mobile phone from the perspective of their smartphones. There are phones that have mobile apps, and there's a big chunk of phones that you have to use USSD and SMS. So you have all those three categories: the mobile apps, the smartphones, you have the web browsers, you have the old phones, and most of the third world countries have that you have to use SMS or USSD. So to implement that, you need to address the mobile companies in the world. There are 800 of them approximately. They all belong to one organization, the GSMA. So to implement, you either go through the route of the GSMA. If that doesn't work, then you have to use the UNICEF and the UN bodies in the respective countries or continents. The key is to address this market simultaneously. It's big. You can do it in chunks, but if you go that route, we can raise the resources we need to address the issue we have at hand. This is possible to be done in the next you can do it in 210 days, 7 months or less. The more you give it thought, it can be done faster. You know, the 210 days was when you're just looking at it. I've given it more time. You can break it, but this 4-6 months, you can do it. Next slide, please.
1 minute, Mike.
Yes, next slide. So the issue here is launch as fast as possible at minimum costs. To do that, you need a lot of partnerships, and you need to bring down the startup cost to $1 million USD and below. Next slide. Hello. The risks, definitely there'll be partnership risks, financial risks, political risk, and technology. But the greatest risk here, you'll all agree, is if we don't do it. The key here is we have to decide to do something. Whatever it is, you will decide. You have to decide. You need that 8-point-something B, and the issues you are going to be tackling is important. So you have to decide. The greatest risk is not deciding. Let's finish this. Next.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lovely children.
Thank you.
They're happy because they go to school. Yeah. Thank you so much. So I will open up again for questions, if there is any question from any of the panelists. And I will start again with Drew or Gail. Any question from your side? No? And I will turn to the distinguished panel on our side. I think Henriette has a question, please.
Thanks very much, Michael, for this presentation. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, I have basically 2 questions here. And again, this goes to the UN norms and values. To what extent is there a risk that children might be addicted to lotteries through your app? Because they are very avid mobile phone users. And how would you address that risk? The other thing...
Thank you.
The other question which I have to you, and that's but that's also a question basically to the team here, is if you look at this, to what extent is this better done by UNICEF, or to what extent is it, as you have a proposal that is UN-wide, precisely to address the multiple risks which you are mentioning? Over to you.
Thank you. The problem of children is universal. The way to address it, since you're using smart technology, is one, age limits. The issue of adult, the age of consent. You know, it's like alcohol. You either use 16, 18, 21. You must have reached the majority age to be able to enter into gaming. The World Rotary Association is a European organization. It has something like 70 lottery inside it. They're doing that quite well because that potential, this issue of addiction of children and this issue of addiction of adults, you have to mitigate that. So you put limits. How many times can you bet per day? How much money can you bet per day or per week or per month? and also you give people the chance to take a break. You know, I switch off the app if I'm on an app for a month or indefinitely. So we'll use technology on that. Now, the moment you bring in the issue of a supranational, and when you look at the scope of what you can raise, it's that issue. You'll have to, the UN has to decide, do you play it at the UNICEF ECW level, or is it a UN whole thing? What I can say at this point, having had experience in that space, looking at the legislation, at the laws of our own country from 2005, in any country, in any jurisdiction, you always need a license. Now, if it's a supranational organization like the UN, it has to make a resolution that we are going into this now, so that the other national entities that are below it, that belong to it, can adhere to that resolution. So that is something that has to be looked at slightly more, because the moment you decide to do that, it will impact on your fundraising capabilities. You have the potential to do $1 billion in a week or $1 billion in a year. It's all up to you, and now the other issues of society. So
we have 1 minute. We have 1 minute left. Let's do one.
Thank you very much for that, Mike. Thank you. And interesting how you outline how the UN system work, and hopefully everyone adheres to those resolutions. But it's a very good point. It's a very good point. And the global dimension of it, of course, is a good one. But at the same time, United Nations comes first. This is great, Mike. I want to ask if anyone else has a question for you. All right, Mike, this is exciting, and I think we all look forward to further discuss your proposal, and we appreciate the time you've taken to explain it, and the passion and commitment that you have shown as you have shared it with us. Thank you very much, Mike. I will now move forward. We are coming back to Richard. Richard has another item, and that is about kanelbullar, which is a Swedish word. I'm Swedish, meaning what are kanelbullar in English? Cinnamon buns. Cinnamon buns. Yeah, you can find them. You find sort of copies of them in New York, not like the real ones, but still. And fascinating. Please tell us about the idea of kanelbullar, Richard.
All right, but the technology, are you hearing me all right?
We hear you very well.
Good. And what are you seeing on your screen?
We see another road. Now we see mountains. Is that up the road? You reach the mountain top.
Oh, geez, really? The mountains are on there already.
Richard, we're sharing from here. Now. I have the presentation. Just go ahead and tell us where you are.
Okay. So this one, I know it's got a funny name, and I cannot pronounce it well. Kanelbullar. Anyway, I'll call him.
Hold on, Mike. I can pronounce that perfectly well. Kanelbullar.
Okay. Every time I need that, I'm going to tap you for this.
Oh, please do.
And really, so if you can go to the next slide, I had to give people a picture of it. So you should have a picture of them and what they look like. This is not really about cinnamon rolls. This is about IKEA. And so in this instance, the strategy is to look at some of the really key, strongest supporters who are already out there for EIE. And IKEA is certainly right there through the IKEA Foundation. They've been major supporters, and they continue to be. This just happens to be sort of represent the company. And so the strategy here is that we're not going after mainstream philanthropy, and that in fact was expressly in your challenge. What I'm suggesting is that we turn our attention, next slide, you should see the cover of the foundation report. In looking at the foundation last year, the IKEA Foundation awarded grants of 144 million euros, which is a very big number. It's a wonderful thing that that they do. And next slide should be the inside of it. From that report, they lead right off with saying children are the most important people in the world. But note that they also say that their campaigns, global campaigns for good causes, engage their customers. So I'm using this to segue into the strategy here. And what I'm suggesting we do is, while they are sensitive to these social causes, is that we be sensitive to what IKEA is really about. Next slide says IKEA Group. Looking at the IKEA corporation, the group of corporations themselves, they do wonderful things and they're great people, but at the end of the day, they are a business. They are out to make money. And in the next slide, you'll see, you should see a map of the world. This is from their annual report, and it just lists how many stores and locations they have around the world, 340 of them. And in the next page from their annual report, it shows the growth of their revenues over the past 10 years. And those are phenomenal numbers. They are now up to 35 billion euros a year in revenues. So to look at that in comparison, the next slide should be a large square box. If that represents a year of IKEA revenues, you hit your button again, the IKEA Foundation grants is really a pretty small element there. So what I'm suggesting is we move into the larger world of IKEA Group and try to work with them in ways that matter to them, but also support the social cause. And the next slide, I'm not sure if you've got this one, but it's IKEA, and we're back to the picture of the cinnamon rolls. And so in reviewing IKEA and trying to understand the company, how they work, their marketing, branding, just their whole corporate strategies, not surprisingly, they're very, very sophisticated in ways that most of us don't know, and we're not aware of, and that's fine. That's why it works. Only 5% of their annual sales are from food, and they really make little or no profit from their food. That's not why it's there. It's there to bring customers in to be comfortable, relaxed, get them to stay longer in the store, and their very low priced food is to give you the signal that IKEA products are inexpensive. So even if you just bought a couch for $600, they're going to make a profit on that, but you only spent $1 on a cinnamon roll, so you're thinking the couch is probably a good deal too. So anyway, without getting into that, the idea here is to try to get into the IKEA corporate side in a way that will benefit them and maybe increase their traffic and therefore revenues and profits, and to do it at the lowest risk way that they can. Now, it would probably still flow back through their foundation. They have a very complicated corporate foundation structure, as many of you know, in several countries. But as we looked at it, it doesn't have to be Tuesdays, but that's their weakest day of the week around the world. And that's when they would like to see probably some more traffic. We picked on the cinnamon rolls because they're very friendly, they smell good, they work for kids. There are no controversies with cinnamon rolls other than them being fattening. So the idea here is you can buy one in the store, or you can buy a 6-pack to take home. And what we estimated, the idea is that IKEA would dedicate their sales from just one day of cinnamon rolls, which is a pretty minor part of their operation, one day a week would go to EIE. This reinforces their branding as good corporate citizens of the world. I've talked with them, and they've told me that this is their message to the world, is to other companies, you can make a lot of money by being good to the environment, to children, to your employees. That is actually their corporate message, besides making money. They like to prove that. And so this is not an inappropriate thing for them to do. I'm saying it could be part of a marketing campaign that would fit with what they already do. In terms of numbers, I'm not sure if I got this slide over to you, Johannes, but
1 minute, Richard.
The estimate is that if on Tuesdays, if 10% of the customers on average bought 3 cinnamon rolls, and that money was dedicated to EIE, that would be $43 million a year. I don't think that would put a dent in IKEA, but it certainly could reinforce their image, their branding. It could increase their traffic. But even if it doesn't, it's a very low risk thing for them to do. I mean, I don't think anyone would criticize them. There's no controversy. It's just cinnamon rolls on a Tuesday. But the point is, we go at them for their corporation and how they operate, as opposed to just what the foundation itself does.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thanks a lot. I think this is it's a very simple. I mean, it's a very realistic proposal, and it's also very easy to understand even for lay people. So I think it's a great idea, and of course, you know, the combination of IKEA and kanelbullar sounds, you know, not only Swedish but also a very brilliant idea. I don't, because we are falling behind 15 minutes, and unless you find that you have any questions, IKEA has been engaged with the UN before. There are some agencies, so it's not a whole new unknown territory. Are there any questions from the panel? And maybe this time I will start here. No, nothing. No. And nothing from Drew and Gail. That will allow us then. Thank you very much for that presentation, Richard. To proceed to the next. Thank you very much. Okay. Then we'll proceed to the next person, trying to catch up with time a little bit, as we are 15 minutes behind schedule. And the next person to make a presentation is Mary Messina on Every Child Needs a School. How the book industry can support education cannot wait to support children to access education in crisis and emergencies. So, Mary, welcome, and please, where are you calling in from? Now we can't hear you. Sorry for that, Mary.
She needs to unmute herself.
You have to unmute yourself. Okay, yeah. You're okay? Can you hear us, Mary?
Can you hear me?
We hear you beautifully. Where are you, Mary?
I'm in Folkestone, which is near Dover. I'm actually looking at France from my house.
How beautiful.
Across the channel. So I'm not very far from France. I'm very far from London, but I'm in the United Kingdom. Good morning.
Good morning, or maybe good afternoon to you. So please, Mary, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for entertaining my idea, and I'm pleased to discuss a little bit more about it. On the second slide, you've got the proposal, and it's a very simple idea. It's almost similar to the previous presentation. And the idea is to raise donations from customers who are buying books. And the customers are requested to add and donate 1% of their book purchases to the ECW fund. Retailers collect and channel the money to ECW fund. So next slide, please. The 50 million that ECW funding with ECW needs will be made from public donations. And to leverage more money, the funding will approach philanthropists, charitable organizations, authors, and businesses to augment the fund, with the hope that there will be extra resources to be invested in an endowment fund. So there's a stream of income. Next slide, please. Part of the idea is to actually increase learning amongst participants in the fundraising campaign. So the people donating online, in store, via app at any checkout point will be able to get information about the cause, about ECW, about the impact of the cause, and the stories that come from the children who are benefiting from the funding that they receive. And part of the idea as well is to ensure or to challenge ECW to utilize funds more efficiently through schemes such as impact bonds. with the hope that they can leverage further funding from non-traditional sources attracted by results-based frameworks. So the idea is a fundraising campaign that is completely comprehensive, that allows us to raise funds for children and for schools in needy areas. And that is a win for retailers, a win for consumers, because they're just being asked for micropayments, very little transactions that add up and reach the goal of meeting students' need. Next slide, please. I've estimated that the US and the UK market book industry is worth 32 billion. You see the references in the handout that I've provided. And the European market is worth 40 billion, the book industry. And all of us at some point buy books. On average, we are reading 12 books a year, either through online, e-line, libraries, magazines, all sorts. So the target is to reach 15% of this market share. The market share we're targeting is only 15%, which realizes 4.8 billion. And of that net sale, we are expecting 1% to be donated to the campaign. So each year we've got 48 million. In the second year, the market share will increase by 3%, and in subsequent years by 3% to give $62 and $76 million in the previous year. And this fund, I want to remind you, will help us leverage further funding from philanthropists, from charitable funds, so that we can set up our endowment fund. Next slide, please. This is a 3-year fundraising campaign. So I've designed it in such a way that it is a project in itself, that it is complete from A to Z. It allows us to recruit key staff so that they can work and be devoted to this, and to establish a suitable legal structure to support the fundraising campaign. And it will be supported by a campaign strategic plan, which identifies the rationale, the targets, the messaging, and everything else that is needed. And
one minute, Mary. 1 minute.
It will be backed up by research to identify prospective allies, and there will be formation of partnerships and agreements to raise the money we need. The risk we have, the logistics, we've got the digital technology in existence. So this is not a new idea. It is already working. It is tried and tested. Amazon is doing it. eBay is doing it. It's just tucking in the book industry into it and getting them to bring money for a legitimate cause, which is children and their education. So the costs are estimated, but they will be confirmed by the business plan. So they are $500,000 for over a 3-year period. The greatest risk is there are so many worthwhile causes. The people we are targeting could be busy with other things, but good research will help us identify good pitching and messaging and support of the brand, and also the idea of educating the public, especially schools, in understanding the cause and the work of ECW will be more attractive because it's a comprehensive package. And then the endowment fund is our backup so that what we are raising is sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. That was a very clean presentation, and I am then also very concise and to the point and easily digestible. So I doubt that there will be many questions, but I will open up the floor. Again, I'll start now with Gail. Do you have a question, or Drew?
Drew here. Mary, thank you. Fully appreciate that the linkage of books and supporting education. Question for you: the book industry itself globally has been under financial challenges. So question, the 1% number that you've picked, is that been compared against the kind of profitability? In other words, is this an immaterial number for them to say absolutely easy for us to do?
Well, the 1% comes from, well, I'm looking at other campaigns. There's the Pennies micro campaign, Pennies micro donation scheme, there's Big Give, and there's evidence that consumers prefer to donate very little. It has to be unnoticeable for them to continue to be interested in the campaign. If I had to ask, and it gives us the amount of money we need. So it is meeting two things. We are asking them for micro payments, and these micro payments, when aggregated together, bring us the financial targets we want to meet.
Thank you.
And also I can add, I was part of a project that developed what is called the Thirsty Planet brand, which is a water project where we raised money for water projects in Africa. And we developed that with a water company in the UK, and only 10p from that sale goes to the fund. And that seems to work very well. When customers are asked for so little, they tend to sign up for it. But when they're asked for more things, they tend to think twice before they sign up.
Thank you very much, Mary. Thanks a lot for that. And Gail, any question from your side, or we proceed?
Yeah, no, it's a compelling project. I've worked in the book industry for a long time, so thank you for the very concise presentation.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else here? I mean, I also agree, and I agree with you. Just the connection between books and education. I'm an author. I actually wrote one book, so I also find it very compelling. And thank you for that, Mary. I think it is a natural correlation between the two. We will move on then to the next presenter. We are back to Richard again, and Richard, this time you will present a college endowment exercise tax. Please, Richard, please go ahead.
Sure. Is my technology working this time?
Yeah, works well.
You're hearing me okay, and you can see the, this time I picked because it's the last one, a winter path. But the college endowment excise tax is what this one is about. And I suspect most of you had not even heard of it before. It is a brand new tax, the first of its kind in the US at least. And it was enacted as sort of at the tail end of the tax reform, the big US tax reform, use that term loosely, from the end of last year. And it is a 1.4% tax on the earnings from the endowments that are held by US colleges that have the majority of their students in the US. And then this is the interesting part, is $500,000 of endowment value per student. So oddly, even some of the larger endowments, those colleges are not subject to this yet, because if they have more students, that ratio comes down. But it's a very targeted tax, as you can imagine, and no one quite knows how it's going to work yet. There was quite a bit of unhappiness, of course, on the part of the colleges, and they felt that they were being singled out for this, and I think they were. Just to give you a sense, there are 2,000 colleges in the United States. Each of these little squares would represent one. And for the number of colleges under these rules that are affected by this new tax, there are 28. So it really is very much targeted at some particular schools. And I've got the names of them here. You'll recognize many of them. These are largely small liberal arts colleges with healthy endowments, because they're very old or just very successful colleges. The largest one in here is Harvard. I think their endowment is something like $35–40 billion or something or other. The tax for them is estimated to be about $40 million a year. So what I'm suggesting here is, first of all, these colleges and their complaint, and even the ones who are not subject to this tax, at least not yet, they point out that the purpose of the endowments are to help with access for lower income families to get into their colleges. And of course, it provides them with academic independence. I mean, this is the purpose primarily of endowments, that and free speech. So they feel that this is something of an attack on it. Admittedly, they're sitting on a lot of money, but this is what they're up against here, and they have not figured out the tax yet, let alone how to avoid it. But like any tax, everybody who has to pay a tax is busy figuring out how to avoid paying the tax, or at least how to minimize it. So tapping into that, looking at the estimates from the federal government, this particular tax is supposed to generate almost $2 billion over the next 10 years, which is not a whole lot of money for the deficits in the US, but it's still, it adds up to a significant amount of money. Most of these colleges have fairly small enrollments, at least by American standards. These are not the big 80,000 enrollment public universities. They're getting by without this tax. And the other thing that's kind of odd is that $500,000, I don't know exactly where it came from, but again, it was probably to focus on those 28 colleges, is not indexed for inflation. So that, as inflation goes, more and more colleges are going to be added to the list in future years if nothing else changes. What I'm suggesting here is a mechanism through which some of these 28 colleges could get involved in EIE, both with their expertise and people, but also technically enrolling some of the students who are in EIE situations into their colleges. They would have to, this can't just be done on paper, they would have to actually be involved here somehow. But as soon as they do that, they may qualify to avoid this tax because they're going to have more students who are enrolled outside the US. That ratio of 500,000 will drop off. All right, why are they going to do this? So they're going to do this to avoid the tax. They're going to wind up probably spending less money on EIE than they would on the tax. They're certainly sending a message about what they think is more important here. But I think they're also doing something very positive. And in the worst case, if it doesn't work to help them avoid this tax, they're going to come out looking very good and making some very positive changes in the world, which they can afford to do. That's why they're in that list of the 28. So this is an interesting mechanism, nothing like it out there before, but you wanted bold, and I thought this would be an intriguing thing to maybe get some new players into the EIE arena, bring some new money into it, and certainly raise awareness of the EIE issues. So that's how it works in the simplest form.
Thank you very much for that, Richard. Thanks. I will open up now for questions. Of course, there's a correlation between universities and primary and secondary school as well. So that's also a natural linkage. I'll open up. Gail, do you have any question?
No, I don't. It's intriguing. And when you're talking about small colleges, can you give me an illustration? Can you give us an illustration?
Of which ones?
Yeah.
I get back to that slide. There's do you see the list? There should be a 2-column list on your screen.
Oh, great. Yeah, unfortunately, it's very minuscule. Yeah.
Okay, so Princeton, Yale, Harvard, Stanford, Juilliard.
No, they're elite schools.
So they are elite schools.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to be sending teams necessarily out into the field for EIE, but they know what they're doing, and I think they could play a very beneficial role, more than just the financial.
No, I agree. Great, thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Gail. Drew, you have a question?
I do indeed, Richard. Thank you. Again, very intriguing here. Richard, if I understand this properly, the way this works is you're playing with the denominator here, in the sense that the more students that are at these universities, the way the excise tax comes down. Is that correct? So it's a question of bringing in more students into their school, and your proposal is to do that with people from these crisis environments?
Correct. And obviously you would want to make those secondary level or perhaps higher education. I know that's not a perfect match for what we're trying to do here, but it needs to be credible. But otherwise, you're correct. It is simple mathematics. That's the way the law is written, is exactly what you're seeing on the screen. 50%, 500,000.
So just to make sure I understand the math, then, is it for every child they bring in, or student they bring in, excuse me, they bring the excise tax down, or do they need to reach a certain hurdle? And if it's the latter, have you done the math as to the number of schools and how many students they would have to bring into this program?
Well, it's hard to predict which of these colleges will want to try this. I certainly would not expect all of them. Maybe a small group with a leader in it that are sort of making a statement, if you will. But if you had a student, pick a small, I don't know, Juilliard maybe has 5,000 students. So if you were to enroll 6,000 students in EIE settings from outside the United States, they automatically would be taken off the list. Those have to be full-time equivalent students. So and that has not been sorted out as to how that will be calculated. Even if you don't do it on the 50% rule, you can also take yourself off the list with the 500,000. And that, of course, just depends on the size of each university's endowment. For example, Northwestern University has an endowment of something like $7 billion, but they don't qualify for this tax yet because I think they've got, I don't know, 20,000 students or something. They haven't quite hit that 500,000. So it would not be that difficult for them to hold it under the 500,000.
Thank you very much. I think we'll have that very last question from Henriette, and then we will move on to the very last finalist. Please, Henriette.
Thanks. Just one last question for you, and that's basically, if you look at the level of admission rates of these highly selective universities, they have admissions rates of roughly 10%, some a lot lower even.
Yes.
And you look at the total population of tertiary education students with the capacity to follow this type of elite universities and take 10% of that. Do you have a sense of how many students in crisis countries would indeed be eligible to be considered whether they could make the cut?
There is, and it's a good question, in terms of admissions, there is nothing in the tax law that says these need to be graduate students or undergraduate students, or there is nothing. It is just full-time equivalent students. So what I would anticipate is that I picked on Juilliard. Juilliard opens up a program for foreign students in foreign locations that has different admission standards. There's nothing that says that these students need to meet the same admission standards as somebody from New York, for example. So I think we get around the admissions question. Now, there's still the integrity of the institution. They don't want just anybody coming in, but I think they could be selected just in a different way.
Thank you very much for that, Richard. I think we have gone around the table now for any questions, and we appreciate your very in-depth presentation. As we are running out of time, we will now proceed to our very last finalist, and that is with Brock Warner, who is with us in the studio today here at Education Cannot Wait /UNICEF in New York City. And Brock will present to us his idea about a 1 in 9 fund. Welcome, Brock, and please go ahead.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So thank you to Education Cannot Wait, and thank you to the jury for taking your time and for listening to this idea. And just a quick thank you to the War Child Canada team back in Toronto, as well as our staff overseas. Everyone's been really excited about being selected as a finalist for this. And also thank you to the brilliant volunteers who helped along the way, as well as the War Child staff. Now, as you said, my name is Brock Warner, and I'm here on behalf of War Child Canada. We're a humanitarian organization. We're currently working in some of the most conflict-affected states in the world. We're also a really proud grant recipient of education funding, doing an education project in northern Uganda. So it's great to be here and diversify our relationship with Education Cannot Wait. Now, being a charity and as a fundraising professional, I've got a problem. That problem is that despite corporations and individuals and foundations being as philanthropic as at any point in our history, there are still an increasing number of charities vying for the charitable dollars that are up for grabs. And a significant limiter here is that a foundation, and often individuals, this similarly applies, Foundations, though, have a foundation payout requirement of 5% of their assets here in the US. And we have a similar thing in Canada. It's called the disbursement quota, and it's actually even a little bit lower. It's 3.5%. This means that traditionally, charities are only involved in this 5% side of the conversation, in the 5% slice of this pie. And I believe that the 1 in 9 fund unlocks the door for charities, and it invites us to mobilize the other 95% of a donor's assets. So how would we do this? Well, we've got a pretty big idea that we believe education cannot wait, in partnership with War Child and with the right private sector partnerships as well, just may be within reach. Our idea is to develop an exchange-traded fund or an index fund, which would direct a very small portion of the fund's assets under management, as little as 0.1% annually, to support education in emergencies and protracted crises. We've named it the 1 in 9 fund for the 1 in 9 children currently living in a war-affected country. It's just a fun coincidence that it's being presented to you as one of 9 ideas today. Now, why an ETF? Primarily because this market is surging. These products are accessible to the average retail investor because they have a much lower threshold for investment than a traditional fund, and they also have lower fees. For pension funds and labor unions that are being increasingly pushed for divestment from their members, the 1 in 9 fund could be the type of ethical investment product that a fund manager is looking for. The global ETF market is growing by more than $1 trillion annually, meaning that with the right partnerships and strategy, we could profit from this growth alone without crowding out any existing traditional sources of funding. Now, if the market does in fact grow to the projected $7.6 trillion by the end of 2020, this means that the 1 in 9 fund would need to attract approximately 0.66% of that market share to meet the target of $50 million in annual revenue for Education Cannot Wait. 1% of this market, if captured, would mean about $76 million annually for Education Cannot Wait. And now, in addition to this, let's not forget that there's a seismic demographic shift underway. Millennials, by the end of 2020, will be the world's largest adult segment. They are going to inherit $30 trillion of wealth by 2025. And we also know that they are twice as likely as any other generation to want to invest in companies with a stated social impact. In the ethical investment space, ESG integration, which stands for environmental, social, and governance, is a pretty standard tool for screening investments. We believe that the 1 in 9 fund should integrate and promote certain ESG filters, but it should not be confused with an impact investment fund or an impact investment product. We want to make sure that we can satisfy investor expectations for ESG criteria, but just as importantly, we want to make sure that we can maximize earnings so that it attracts as wide a customer base as possible. Doing so increases the assets under management, in turn increasing the returns for Education Cannot Wait. And as ethical investing and ETFs grow in popularity, there's a risk that the charities will continue to be excluded from the conversation about a donor's invested assets. We have a window of opportunity here to be bold and to create space that would allow us to flourish and claim our space alongside CEOs, entrepreneurs, and investors. Our message to potential partners and investors is pretty simple. Let's make money, not war. It's possible to invest responsibly, fund development projects, and make money all at once. The 1 in 9 fund is our big idea for a big challenge, and we hope that you're up for the challenge because we certainly are as well. So thank you very much, and I'd love to answer questions.
Thank you very much for that, Brock. I must say, when I hear about the ethical investment space, I get all my antennas out of excitement. And also your quote here, let's make money, not war. There is a way of working that is also very aligned. And I know Henriette and I will agree on that with the UN values, and this is so very important to us. Thank you very much for that. So I will open up for others too. Now, this time I'm going to start over here. So maybe I will start with our colleague. Now, you have this beautiful name, but now I forgot it. Caleb. Caleb, would you like to start from Rockefeller Foundation, who also have a very strong ethical framework, please?
Sure.
As a founder of the UN building down there on the river, please.
I am curious to hear your thoughts on how this product would be differentiated from other similar products in the market.
There aren't many products that identically aligned with this, but the closest thing that I've seen, which the Rockefeller played a part with, was the YWCA Women ETF, which I think is incredible. The announcement that it was now available on the New York Stock Exchange was August 27th. So, which is after the time we would have submitted this idea. So it's obvious that a lot of people are looking at this space and looking at this product of ETF specifically and seeing opportunity and potentially a slice of that pie of the assets under management, that if the product is designed correctly to suit a niche market, there's incredible growth. And fund managers are scrambling, I'm told, to find products like this to try and meet this growing demand, and seeing this demographic shift of the millennials coming in, as well as technological trends of simplified online tools like a Wealthsimple, like Questrade and others that are allowing people to make these decisions independently at their desk. How much do I want this to go to a social cause? And so that demographic, technological, and market shift could be a perfect storm that we'd love to situate ourselves in the middle of.
Lovely.
Yeah. And so what would be the benefits of starting a new entity to pursue an ECW-oriented ETF, with the structure that you propose, versus partnering with, for example, Impact Shares that's launching the YWCA and explicitly partners, with nonprofits across the spectrum to sort of design ETFs that are oriented towards them and then direct these?
I imagine a space where every sector should have this product available to them as an alternative revenue source. And so if gender equity space has the YWCA Women Fund, great. I want nothing more than for it to succeed. And if education in emergencies can have its own, great. And so on and so forth. Education domestically, healthcare issues, on and on. I would hope that we have a wide array of a complex, deep market of options for investors, be they institutional, retail, individuals. I would love nothing more than to have this be a very competitive space.
Thank you, Henriette.
Thanks very much. I maybe was impressed with this proposal, but it's similar question to the other ones. And this proposal, let me just say, I think it's far more difficult for the UN almost than to think up how it would work, because ultimately you're changing investment behavior, so you're asking questions as well to the UN. And so I would love you to think from a UN perspective, because basically if you would change the behavior of the millennium investors and you look at the shared norms and values of the UN system, which are similar but difficult to an NGO environment and a difficult legal setup, what challenges would you see for the UN to make this work?
Well, I think you would want to hit the ground running. And I think that if anyone can do this, you can do this. This idea has been, if any teammates are watching back in Toronto, they know that I've been shopping this idea around quietly in-house. And when this opportunity to pitch this came up, we realized this idea that might actually be a little too big of an idea for War Child to pursue in isolation, under wraps. This is something that we need to bring in big partners on. So Education Can't Wait, hosted by UNICEF, is a great entry point to potentially tap into UN Global Compact members. You've got the United Nations Capital Development Fund that would have expertise we'd be able to tap. The PRI signatories would be the first people I would want to talk to. And there are thoughts that I have about how we might get that volume earlier so that we can earn those returns earlier. And one would be looking at which audiences, which markets do we want to pursue, institutional or otherwise. Looking at the partners who are providing these funds, depending on who you go to and the products they specialize in. They may or may not have a product that could be rebranded, say. If they have something that's already screened out for human rights on the ESG criteria, but does not fund in any way a development project, there might be an opportunity for a fund that has a large amount of assets under management already to implement this type of sharing of revenue, which would make it a more unique and a more interesting product, which would increase assets under management, and then they would be able to take it to market. So the partnerships would be really important. And yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Brock. Thank you. I want to see Gail or Drew. Any questions from your side?
Yeah, Drew, do you have questions?
No, go right ahead.
Yeah, no, this is kind of near and dear to my heart, since this is what I teach at Oxford and direct a impact investing program and social finance program. And the challenge, we're currently doing a case study on Canada's social investing environment around the SDGs. as well as finishing up a project with UBS. So the timing is right. The need is there. I think and certainly the focus on SDGs is absolutely correct. I think there's a dynamic between civil society organizations and the investment community, and we call it lost in translation. So understanding how you build your team who are sophisticated in finance and understand social justice and social change will be really important. I think I agree with you. I think the verdict's still out with millennials, though. I've seen the research, but in talking to the wealth managers, and again, I deal with 400 to 500 wealth managers in 90 countries. They're still not seeing it yet at the scale. Good statistics, important. As a mother of 2 millennials, I'm hoping they'll do the right thing. But good timing. I've got lots of questions, and I certainly have resources you may want to tap to explore this kind of project. So all exciting and lots of opportunity.
Thank you very much, Gail. Drew, very last question.
No, I'm good, Frank. Thank you. Actually, I think it was very well explained.
Yeah. No, thank you very much, Brooke. I also found it very well explained. And I think probably one thing that I liked really was the lack of sense of possessiveness. You know, it's the cause above all, and that's the 75 million children, and the willingness to move it out of war child and look for others to do it together. One humanity. Thank you very much for that. And I think this is our very last finalist. And we would like to thank you all once more. And I will go around the table and I will thank you all in person. Thanking Lisa. That was Yasser. Yasser, thank you very much. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Richard, Mike, and Mary, and our very last presenter, Brock. I think it was wonderful to have you with us, and just the creativity and the awareness and the commitment to children and young people who are living in the harshest of circumstances, far away from our comfort zone, and that there are people like you, brilliant, smart, creative, that haven't not just forgotten them, but are thinking actively to find solutions for them. And we will, of course, be in touch and hopefully partner with some of you. And thank you very, very much. And we will have to, for the sake of conflict of interest, ask everyone to leave the room and the line. But before that, tomorrow at 11...
Drew and Gail, you please stay.
Yeah, Drew and Gail, of course, will stay. You're part of the jury, our distinguished jury. But for the participants, the finalists, 11:20 tomorrow at the Global People Summit, we will announce the winners. And you can follow the announcement online, and you can also visit the website globalpeoplesummit.org, and you can find a link on the website if you don't do it on Google, on educationcannotwait.org. And then for the next 3 months, we will work with the winners to translate the challenge proposal into a real business plan, and then work with you to find strategies for implementing the winner's vision and plan and the business plan. And with that, again, thank you very much, all of you who are here in the studio and who are online around the globe, from the UK to Kenya to, I'm not sure where you were, Yasser, but in the Middle East, Rabat, in the Middle East, to Morocco, and to our colleagues here in the New York studio. Thank you very much, and more from us tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.